that that free, competitive, and this is your statement, I do have an ideology. My judgment is that free, competitive markets are by far the unrivaled way to organize economies. We've tried regulation, none meaningfully worked. That was your quote. You have the authority to prevent irresponsible lending practices that led to the subprime mortgage crisis. You were advised to do so by many others, and now our whole economy is paying its price. Do you feel that your ideology pushed you to make decisions that you wish you had not made?
Well, remember that what an ideology is a conceptual framework with the way people deal with reality. Everyone has one. You have to exist, you need an ideology. The question is whether it is accurate or not. And what I'm saying to you is, yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant or permanent it is, but I've been very distressed by that fact. But if I may I just finish an answer to the question previously?
You found a flaw in the reality?
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
In other words, you found that your view of the world, your ideology was not right. It was not working.
Precisely. No, that's precisely the reason I was shocked, because I've been going for 40 years or more with very considerable evidence that it was working exceptionally well.
I want to thank you on behalf of the committee.
Alan Greenspan was the foremost proponent of these derivative products, credit derivatives, which are now at the heart of the meltdown, of them being not subject to regulation. And his theory was as follows, that he believed these instruments afforded banks the ability to move risk out to the economy. In other words, to exchange their risk of making mortgages and having to worry whether people would pay the mortgages, and creating financial products that would invite the rest of the financial world to participate in that risk. His theory was, well, this isn't making matters worse, it's making matters better, because banks, when they make all these mortgages, won't be subject to forfeitures. Unfortunately, what we have seen in our most recent history of this credit crisis is, yes, it spread the risk through the economy and made everybody subject to that risk, not just the banks. The banks got so cocky because they thought they were passing the risk off that the discipline of being worried about whether somebody could pay their mortgage disappeared. And they made as many mortgages as they could make. They weren't interested in whether the loans would be paid back. That was somebody else's problem, translated through these credit derivatives and other unregulated instruments. They just wanted to do the transactions, make as many of these mortgages as they could. Every time they signed somebody up for a mortgage, they brought huge amounts of money in, and that's the way they profited.
That was Michael Greenberger, the former director for trading and markets at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, in an excerpt from the film American Casino. It's opening today in New York. The film directed by Leslie Cockburn, who co-produced it with her husband, Andrew Cockburn. They're joining us here in our Firehouse studio. It's nice to have you in New York.
Thank you.
Thank you. That quote, Leslie, of Alan Greenspan is quite amazing as he's being challenged by Henry Waxman.
Yes. Well, when people hear it, they just find it extraordinary that this man could reduce the collapse of several American cities in terms of, you know, the millions of foreclosures, that he could reduce it to saying that it was a flaw in the model.
That he had believed in for 40 years.
Yes. And that it worked very well for 40 years. So he was just surprised that there was this flaw in the model. I mean, taking no responsibility whatsoever for what's happened. And yet it was Alan Greenspan who very clearly was the biggest advocate in Washington for what's called spreading the risk, i.e. that the banks would pass on the risk to all the rest of us, which is exactly what's happened. And Alan Greenspan thought that was a great idea.
Talk about deregulation, Andrew Cockburn.
Well, deregulation, we start the film, I mean, the sort of the final descent into disaster from December 2000, when Phil Gramm, acting on behalf of, it was basically a bill written by a bunch of Wall Street lawyers, smuggled a bill into the appropriations bill at 7 o'clock in the evening on December 15th, when they were all thinking about going home for Christmas, basically saying, making it illegal to regulate, among other things, credit default swaps, which were had been considered, which are, you know, basically gambling. I mean, it's a form, it's a bet.
Making it illegal.
To regulate them. Making it illegal, impossible for state.
Not just keeping them deregulated, but making it illegal.
Yeah, specifically saying that state and local, you know, state governments couldn't go after them under the gambling laws, because lots of states have gambling laws, and these very much, this really, you know, fits the bill for as an instrument of gambling. And that's what they put in. So that was the crucial act of deregulation. But there's a long and hallowed history which went to, you know, create this disaster. The end of the all the other various other Depression era reforms that have been put in place, which were all cheered on by both parties, by all administrations. But we stayed with that because that what the December 2000 Act was what really sent us over the cliff.
Leslie Cockburn, you began making this film in January of 2008.
That's
this
right.
is before all of the economic meltdown, the obvious effects of it.
Yes.
What made you start American Casino?
Well, there were a lot of things going on at that time. One, there had been a mini crash in 2007 in August of financials. And that tipped us off that there was something very serious going on. Also, 2 hedge funds, Bear Stearns, collapsed in 2007. Leverage, if you looked at the market, leverage, which means borrowing, was completely out of control by the banks, the investment banks. At the other end of the scale, already there were foreclosures on every courthouse steps in America. You could go and find that houses were on the block. We live in Washington, we went to Baltimore and found that houses were being sold every 3 minutes on the courthouse steps. So it was time to do something. And we knew also that lawmakers in Washington were terrified that that there were serious problems underlying this crisis, and it wasn't going to go away.
Your scenes of the auctions on the courthouse steps in Baltimore are amazing. I mean, it almost looks like there's no one there buying. It's just the auctioneer.
Exactly. All those properties were going back to the banks.
Yeah. The one guy you see in the auction scene, the one parent bidder, he's acting on behalf of a vulture, a foreclosure vulture who buys up houses. You know,
so you see the auctioneer and his sidekick, and you see one guy in jeans and sneakers. I think it was sneakers. I'm not sure.
Right.
Holding a phone.
Yeah.
And he was making decisions, and he would respond to the auctioneer on the steps.
That's right. That's the market.
Houses.
But most of them go back to the banks.
We're going to play more from American Casino that's opening tonight here in New York. Our guests are Leslie Cockburn, who directed American Casino, and her husband, Andrew Cockburn, who co-produced American Casino. He is the author of the book Rumsfeld, The Rise, Fall, and Catastrophic Legacy. His Rise, Fall, and Catastrophic Legacy. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
All I wanna do is get away, get away. This ain't right, yeah, times is hard. Don't take away her house, cause she got 2 jobs, and that's all in all. She working real hard, and plus she don't want her stuff to be gone. She got kids crying inside, they dying. It's embarrassing to see all your clothes outside, because they is wrong, just leave her alone. She gotta find another place that she can call home. Got 3 kids, yeah, right, more like 9. Yeah, living in a house for 30 days to find a new place to run away with all her kids. Never gonna leave him, cause that what her mom did. Steady searching for anything to shelter. Held her head up high, and she know times will get better. You know it's hard out here for young black mothers, protecting her cubs through the good or bad weather. What's the percentage on your mortgage and your house is gone? What's the percentage on your mortgage and your life is gone? What's the percentage on your mortgage? Where's the percentage on your mortgage? Where's the percentage on your mortgage and your house is gone? Where's the percentage on your mortgage and your life is gone? Where's the percentage on your mortgage? Where's the percentage on your mortgage? It's a pain, seeing my mother work to death. She work 24 hours, but get nothing but less. She's strong, but I can see her breaking down. Cause when you get something new, they come around. Raising mortgage and causing stress. She needs some rest to get the best. For me and her, memories.